Hello, welcome back to AP World History Modern. Today we're going to begin our last day of our intro contextual unit, and we're going to be doing an overview of Dar al-Islam. All right. So we're going to start with our daily five. So go ahead and read through this and come back when you're done. All right, hopefully you got the correct answer there as 4. All right, 4. All right, hopefully you get the correct answer there as 1, the Abbasid. Hopefully you got the correct answer there as 1. We'll talk about this in class today. All right, hopefully you got the correct answer there as 1. Yes, 1. So speaker A. And hopefully you got the correct answer there as speaker D, which is 4. Right. Right, and this one doesn't require any content knowledge, just you read the map. So the answer there is 1. All right. All right, and we'll discuss some of these things, or almost all of these things, with this class. All right, so Islam, all right, Dar al-Islam. Like a lot of these different religions, these are things that you've covered in earlier grades. I know if you came through the public school system here in the state of Georgia, you would have learned about Islam when you were a 7th grade. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on origins and whatnot. I'm just going to run through some kind of basics as they apply or as they're applicable to this course. Okay. So I generally start class by just asking, what is this? Right, what is this? And, or where is this? And for the most part, students are pretty easy to identify where in the world this is. This is in the city of Mecca. But very few kind of know the name, the Kaaba, or what it is. All right. So, but why is this important? Why is Mecca important? All right. So something you would have learned when you were younger, are the 5 pillars within Islam. So what I tell students in class is you don't really need to know these individually. Really, there's one that we kind of deal with in this class, and then there's the second one I kind of mentioned today on with some contextual stuff. So that is number 1. Excuse me, a little frog in my throat. All right, so the first one is the Proclamation of Faith. So it has to be said by believers, must be said in Arabic. Okay? And so not too uncommon for religions to have some kind of proclamation of faith. Second pillar is prayer. Pray 5 times a day, facing Mecca, followed by ritual with or after you ritually wash. Okay. Number 3, the third pillar, is fasting during the holy month of Ramadan during daylight hours. So from sunrise to sunset, depending upon what time of year, because Ramadan it moves on the Christian calendar. Right? So Ramadan is significant because it is believed by Muslims that during the month of Ramadan, the angel Gabriel had come to Muhammad during the month of Ramadan in year 610. Alms, right? Alms is similar within Christian society to the concept of tithings. However, alms are required, a spiritual requirement within Islam. 2.5% of wealth must be donated. And the last one is the Hajj, right? And of the 5 pillars, this is the one that within our course comes up quite a bit. All right, so I'm gonna take a moment here and just kind of draw a map, because this is what I do in class. So here's my all right, so where should I start this map? Let's just kind of make this over here. Just kind of start with North Africa. All right. Over, still the Anatolian. Sea, kind of kick down to the Crimean. So where Constantinople is, kind of doing where Greece is now. Just kind of do the Italian, the heel, and then kicking over towards Sicily. That came out not very pretty. All right, and then Iberian Peninsula. All right, kick that up. And I apologize, I'm just kind of doing this off from memory. All right. Over Horn of Africa, let's come up and do the Red Sea, Arabian Peninsula, kick this over and do the Persian Gulf, and kind of kick down a little bit. All right, so that being said, let's label this Dar al-Islam. Right, it's part of your homework last night. So when I say that, you should know exactly where that is. All right, so where's Mecca? The city of Mecca is on the Arabian Peninsula, off the water, right? So kind of off the traditional trade routes, about 100 miles off the coast, right? So Mecca. All right, so let's kind of move up a little bit. That's where the city of Medina is. Jerusalem. Over here is Constantinople. All right. So there. All right. So when we talk about prayer 5 times a day facing the city of Mecca, right, where the Kaaba is, that is there. Right? That's where the city of Mecca is. And this is site is. All right. So that's where this is. All right. All right, so the Hajj. Let's just kind of talk about this. Why is the Hajj such a so important? The Hajj is extremely important in this course because you do have that requirement, right? So the Hajj, right? You have this requirement once in every able-bodied Muslim's lifetime. They have to make this pilgrimage, right, to Mecca. This will serve as the reason why it's such a big deal. This will serve as a unifying force within Dar al-Islam, right? So different religions have kind of different factors of unifying forces. For example, right? So within Christianity, within many branches of Protestantism, there's not a strong unifying force. Some branches of Protestantism do have councils. Others do not. Others are simply standalone churches, and there's no connection between similar denominations not in that location. Some forms of Christianity are highly unified, right? Strong unifying forces. Like, for example, the Roman Catholic faith within Christianity has a very strong unifying influence in it. So you could go to a Roman Catholic mass here in town, and you could get on a plane and fly to Lima, Peru. And what is going to be done in that mass on that day would be the exact same thing. Same reading, same gospel reading, same Old Testament reading. Highly unified, right? Dar al-Islam, right, as a unifying force. The Hajj functions as such, right? Functions as a unifying force. So what this means is everyone around planet Earth, right, who practices Islam has to go there. And because everyone who is a practicing Muslim has to go there and spend some time there, maybe just a week or two, maybe a month. Some people, kind of going through the historical accounts, some people spent years there. Staying with some of the Sufi schools. Who controls Mecca controls the way in which things get perceived within Dar al-Islam, right? Or you control Mecca, you control Islam, right? Maybe another simple way of saying this. So one of the things that we watch for within history or within this course is who is in control of Mecca, and then how does that influence how Mecca or how Islam is being practiced. And really we're really kind of looking at Sufism and the kind of role that Sufism plays within Dar al-Islam versus when wanes. Okay, and so that's kind of one of those things that we keep track of. Is who controls Mecca. All right. So that all being said, kind of the early part. I'm just going to run through a couple basic facts. Nothing too shocking here, right? So Islam is monotheistic. Allah is the Arabic word for God. Early Islam was generally considered to be egalitarian relative to other monotheistic faiths, right? And this has a lot to do with what you see there, but it also has a lot to do with the fact that Islam emerges out of a pastoral nomadic society. And pastoral nomadic societies are just generally more egalitarian than settled societies, right? So it's kind of just part of the origins of where it comes from, that it's going to be egalitarian. And then, of course, this provides a focus for one of our changes over time. So the role of women within Dar al-Islam, right? How does it change? The religion starts off with a founder who married a wealthy widow who is a successful merchant, right? Ran her own business, very successful business. Muhammad's daughters are known to have fought in battles. So these are just a couple of pieces of evidence from early Islam that it was egalitarian. You could make an argument for egalitarianism, right, within early Islam, and we will see a slow change over time with that, so that by the time we get into the Abbasid Caliphate, veiling becomes common, right, and whatnot. All right, the Ummah. All right, so the Ummah, community of the faithful, and of course within early Islam, within the Rashidun Caliphate, the Ummah will choose the successor of the Caliph, or of Muhammad initially, and then of the Caliphs. So a democratic tradition existed within early Islam, right? And of course, Sharia, and a very, very important concept to understand. I'm just going to take a moment here and just throw this in here. So when you talk about Sharia, right? Sharia is law, right? The legal code that you see within, often in your theocratic Islamic societies, right? So, right, law, right? A judge who studies Sharia would be a qadi. And as far as where Sharia comes from or how it functions, there's really two basic places. There are different schools of Sharia. I think there's 4 major schools of Sharia. So it's not going to be the same for all. So I'm just giving you generic facts that are not true for all forms of Sharia. All right, but just generally speaking, where would a qadi go? Where would a judge go to determine whether or not someone is guilty of violating a crime? Right. Probably the easiest way to understand that is look at how we do this in the United States. Our legal system is founded on this concept of English civil law. English civil law is based upon precedent. So our government creates laws. Right? Our government creates laws, and then when you are accused of violating those laws, you can then argue against that by using past precedences. Right, so previous decisions made by judges. Right, so we use precedents. Right, Sharia law, functions differently here. One could make an argument it functions more similarly to like a Napoleonic code, if you want to use a European example. But there is a book that is used for these interpretations, and then there's a series of books that are used. Right, so one of the books, Quran, and there's all kinds of different ways that you might see this thing spelt. Q-U apostrophe R-A-N, Q-U-U. Anytime you're talking about translating a foreign language into English, there's going to be deviant spellings, right, of that. All right, so the other source of this is the Hadith. And while I'm sure most of you have heard of the Quran before, probably most of you are not familiar with what the Hadith is. All right, so the Hadith is a collection of books or accounts about Muhammad. All right, and the way I generally describe this is, the Quran are the revelations that flowed through the Prophet Muhammad that were, starting in the year 610 during the month of Ramadan, and then continue throughout his lifetime. Right, so Muhammad himself was illiterate, so they begin to get written down around the year 613. Right, and that's what the Quran is, right? The revelations that come through Muhammad and then get put down, right? So the word of God, right? The word of Allah. The Hadith is different, right? So for the vast majority of the time, Muhammad would not have been in that revelation mode. He would have been spending time with his family, or spending time with friends, or hearing controversies and issues going on around him, going to war, right? He would have been doing life, right? And what the Hadith is the accounts of those other times. And there's a vast collection of Hadiths. Some of them were written by people who personally knew Muhammad and were writing down their personal reflections and experiences. Others were written, over 100 years later and had been passed down through multiple generations. So because of that fact, some Hadiths are considered to be more valid than others, or more trustworthy than others. But these are where you would go for all kinds of reasons, right? So, like, what prayer did Muhammad say before he went into battle? That might be something you would look in a Hadith for, right? In interpretations on laws is another reason why you might go, right? So we talk about Sharia, right? That's generally what you're referencing there, right? And there's your judge or your qadi. All right, so let's kind of move on. I'll just leave this here for a second in case you want to pause and read. Okay. All right. So jizya, that was from your reading last night as well. All right, so I created that map. So let's kind of add this map, and then we'll talk about Sunni and Shia and get into that real quick. All right. So let me make a brief little timeline. All right. Let me kind of do this in a way that, see if I can fit this stuff in. All right. Let's do a timeline. All right. So it goes back further in time and goes ahead. So let's start this timeline in, let's start in 622. All right, so 622. 622 is a kind of a good timeline start. So that's the date of the Hijra. Okay, so this is year one on most Muslim calendars, most Islamic calendars. So the Hijra is the date in which Muhammad is expelled from the city of Mecca, and then is invited to Medina. Okay, so sometimes referred to as the flight, right? The flight from Mecca to Medina, right? Where he goes to Medina. I read once he was invited as a qadi, right? So as like a judge, and that's what he initially does. And then he accumulates followers, and eventually, we'll conquer the city of Mecca, and then most of the Arabian Peninsula will be under his control by the time we get to the year 632. All right, so let me pull up a different color here. All right, so 632, and let's just run this. Not gonna get too specific on this because just a survey course. Let's say 661. All right, so 632 to 661. This is often referred to as the Rashidun, right, or the Rashidun Caliphate. All right, Rashidun Caliphate. Sometimes the four rightly guided caliphs. So these are the successors to Muhammad after he dies in 632, and they were selected by the Ummah, right? So they were selected by themselves. Maybe maybe you can make an argument here for like a proto form of democracy in the earliest years of Islam. Right? It's during the Rashidun Caliphate that you see an expansion, right, kind of beyond, right, so beyond the Arabian Peninsula, and you see an expansion. And I'm just gonna kind of roughly throw some borders here. All right, so by the time we get to 661, this is roughly. Are we frozen or something? What happened? All right, let me close all this down and restart this because it looks like my thing froze. Close the program. All right. Let me try to reopen that. Elmo. All right, so by the time we get to the end of the Rashidun Caliphate in 661, Islam has spread, right? Has spread out into the eastern portion of what used to be the Byzantine Empire, the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, right? Egypt is conquered. Obviously, the land in and around Jerusalem, Syria. Right, modern day Syria is conquered. So you see that all coming under the control of the Rashidun. All right, so let me continue this little map since I'm on it. Let's do it. All right, so after that, well, I guess I probably should. The reason I did this is here at the end of the Rashidun Caliphate. This is the fourth of the rightly guided caliphs is Ali. Right, and Ali is, you want to kind of look at the cause of the Sunni Shia split within Islam. It's kind of centered around Ali, and so Ali had put his name in following the death of Muhammad to become the first caliph, right, or the first one following Muhammad, and he does so every subsequent time until the third one, right, and then the third caliph is murdered by a couple of Egyptians who were followers of Ali, and then Ali is named, and then shortly thereafter he himself is killed. So Shia Islam, right, will then deviate from the rest of the Ummah in this regard, right, and who they believe the actual successor should be. Right, so at that point, we then have the establishment of a minority. And early on, it is kind of centered in and around what is today Iraq. It's kind of where originally was centered. And this will come up in class. You got 1.5 billion plus Muslims on planet Earth. A very sizable percentage, a couple 100 million, will identify as Shia. Right, so it is something that you need to be aware of, that there is a difference, and we talk about that later in the course, especially when we get into the 1500s and the Ottoman Safavid rivalries and the Mughal Safavid rivalries and the such. All right, let me kind of go back to my map here. All right, so following the death of Ali. We have a transition taking place, and we stop with elections, and we kind of move on to a hereditary monarchy becomes the norm. So from 661 up until 750, right? Let's put that 750, 661 to 750, and this is the Umayyad, right? This is the Umayyad. So Umayyad, Umayyad Caliphate. And while Mecca and Medina and Jerusalem will remain spiritual capitals within Dar al-Islam, there's a shift in the political center over to Damascus. So what is today Damascus, Syria, becomes the political capital of the Umayyads. Okay, and we see an expansion. Right, we see an expansion under the Umayyad, most specifically across North Africa, across North Africa, into Western Europe. All right, so initially, kind of as far as Tours, in what is today France, but then kind of settling around the Pyrenees. All right, and so this expansion makes the Umayyad Empire one of the top 10 largest empires in all of world history. Right, kind of a massive amount of territory that came under their control. All right. Following that is, let's go green. Why not? Is the Abbasid. Right, so let's move over to my timeline. So the Abbasid Caliphate. This is really going to kind of run towards the end of this. I'm just going to leave a little room there for the Ilkhanate. All right, so in 750 through 1258 is the Abbasid, A-B-B-A-S-I-D, the Abbasid Caliphate. Okay, and it is during the Abbasid Caliphate that we get this, probably a little marker here. If there is a golden age for Islam, it is during this first couple hundred years of the Abbasid Caliphate. Right. So one of the things that we see happen during the Abbasid Caliphate is their land does contract a little bit. All right, their land does contract a little bit, and there is a reason for that. When the Abbasid will take power through making some arrangements with Shia Muslims for their support, and there's a prolonged battle which eventually results in a massacre in the year 750 of the Umayyad family dynasty. But not all of them will be killed in Damascus. One will flee. Right, one will flee to Cordoba. All right, so I'm going to put this in a different color. So over here is Cordoba. Okay. Right, so one will flee there, and so this is being ruled by an Umayyad, right, or a descendant of the Umayyads. So there's kind of a bit of a contraction. Right, kind of a bit of a contraction here. Just kind of throw that in there. So yeah, what is that? It goes until 1031. Right, so let's just kind of put this on here. It's like 750, 751-ish through about 10. Oh God, I really think about this. I think it's 1031. I think it's 1031, is when that comes to an end. And then after that, you're going to see a transition, and different people will come to rule over Al-Andalus. Right? Originally, it's going to be an emirate, right? And then eventually, it'll identify as a caliphate. By the time you get to the 900s, once the Abbasid Caliphate begins to weaken, once that golden age comes to an end, they'll stop the pretenses of paying homage to the Abbasid and declare themselves as their own caliphate. All right. So, all right. So where was I? Golden age. There you go. So we see this golden age, and when the Abbasid take power, they move their capital over to Baghdad. All right, so the Baghdad, let's call this, let's kind of put a little thing over here, golden age of Islam. This is the early years of the Abbasid, the first couple hundred years of the Abbasid Caliphate. So what do we see here? We see the house of wisdom is established, right? The house of wisdom is established. A great library / university type structure. It is during this time that we see algebra, right, and trigonometry are developed. And of course, one of the great reasons for the development of algebra and trigonometry, is what is sometimes referred to as Guptan. Gupta is the golden age of South Asian Hindu civilization, right? So Guptan is referring to a knowledge diffused into Dar al-Islam, into Baghdad, right, from South Asia. So Guptan Arabic numerals, right? And you're probably familiar with Guptan Arabic. Sometimes it's called Hindu Arabic numerals. Oftentimes it's just identified as Arabic numerals, so the Guptan or Hindu isn't always on there. But that's where the numbering system comes from, and it looks like this. Let's just put in IE parentheses. It looks like this, right? And then goes on. So you should be, assuming you're probably familiar with this numbering system. So this is a numbering system that will be adopted at the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, and of course will result in some pretty fast evolution of mathematics. So Baghdad had but had knowledge diffused to it coming from Constantinople and from South Asia. So it becomes a center where knowledge is diffused into, and then once that knowledge is developed, and you develop these forms of mathematics like algebra and trigonometry, it will then be diffused across Dar al-Islam. And this is where Cordoba becomes an intellectual center of Europe, because Cordoba had access to all of that knowledge that is being developed in Baghdad. Other things that we see coming out of this golden age is literature and philosophy. And I'm just going to kind of focus on one thing: preservation of Greco-Roman knowledge. Right? The majority of what we have preserved today from ancient Greece and Rome do not come from European sources, or we don't trace those back from European sources. They, you have a series of treaties between Byzantium and the Abbasids in which these texts, writings of people, like Euclid or Pythagoras, or in the philosophies, your Plato's, and in the sciences, your Aristotle's, and the arts, your Sophocles'. You have these works, right, as actual parts of formal military treaties, peace treaties, where they're then brought into Baghdad. They're translated from Greek into Arabic, diffused around Dar al-Islam in Arabic, and then from Cordoba they'll be introduced into Western Europe, and this culture will then be diffused back into Europe via Islam. Right, so it'll then be translated from Arabic into Latin, and then into the lingua franca of today, right, of wherever you are. All right, so when we talk about the golden age of Islam, these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. All right, but this does change, right? This does change around in the 900s. You start to see a transition taking place. Right, and I guess maybe in the 900s you start to see some fragmentation taking place. So let's just kind of put an asterisk here, right? And it's going to be true until we get to 1258, right? So what is this asterisk referring to? I'm going to throw this down here. You have like the Fatimid. Right, Fatimid it's actually a Shia leadership, but the majority of the population of the Fatimid were Sunni. Modern day Egypt. Okay, you'll see them rise up as independents. Really, you start to see an introduction of the Seljuks. Right, the Seljuks are a Turkic group coming down from the Central Asian steppe, and they're really making an appearance in the 1230 and in the 1030s. Right, they will sack Baghdad in the 1050s, and I guess the big date for them is 1071. Right, 1071 is the battle of, I might spell this wrong, Manzikert. Oh, God, how do you spell that? I think it's a K. I apologize if I'm wrong on that one. So the Battle of Manzikert. It's kind of what they, and the Battle of Manzikert is going to, really scare Constantinople, right? So it's a major victory against the Byzantines, right? So, but what we are seeing taking place, in the 900s through the year 1000, if I were to kind of give a topic to this or a main idea to this, we are seeing decentralization. Of political authority. All right, so Dar al-Islam remains unified culturally under the Abbasid Caliphate. However, politically, right, we're seeing a fragmentation beginning here around the year in the 900s and into the early 1000s, right? And it will stay like that, right? While we're kind of talking about this, right, there's also another kind of sub thing going on here called the Crusades. And if you're looking for the causes of the Crusades, I've already kind of touched on one. One is the Battle of Manzikert is going to, by the Seljuks. The victory by the Seljuks is going to, make the Byzantines believe that they are about to fall. And also the Fatimids, since we've already mentioned them, are going to restrict Christian missionary or Christian pilgrimage access to Jerusalem. Those two things are going to result in the 1095 call to a crusade. 1095 call for a crusade by Pope Urban II. And by 1099, you are going to see crusaders making their way down the coast. Syria, what is today Syria, Lebanon, and towards Jerusalem. All right. And so 1099, Jerusalem will be conquered by the Christian crusaders. Right. And you're going to get about a century-long period where you have a number of Christian kingdoms here in the Eastern Mediterranean. Right. So this will then give rise to the former leaders of the military bodyguards of the Fatimids. Let's just say Saladin. All right. So Saladin will defeat the Christian kingdoms that are there, and he'll give rise to what's known as the Ayyubid. Right, the Ayyubids, within this decentralized era, right, and then they will last for about 100 or so years, and then you're going to see the rise of the Mamluks. Right. Mamluk, right? The Mamluks. And the Mamluks are what Saladin and the other Kurds who were like him were for the Fatimids, their bodyguards and military of the Fatimids. The Mamluks, once again, another Turkic people who are the military and the personal bodyguards of the Ayyubids. They will rise to prominence in 1260. 1260 there. The Mamluks will will defeat and stop the Mongols, and will coexist with the Ilkhanate. All right, so Ilkhanate after Baghdad falls. All right, so the Mamluks rise with the fall of the Abbasid Caliphate and then stop the Mongol advance. Right? Then the Mamluks will be in place, and the Mamluks will control Mecca. Right? The Mamluks will control Mecca but this is kind of beyond our time frame that I want to talk about today. Right? But the Mamluks will control Mecca until 1517. I believe that is. All right. So I might be out by a year or two. But I think it's 1517 when the Mamluks are defeated by the Ottomans, by the Ottoman Turks. All right. So we see this kind of massive decentralization. All right. I think that might be about it for today. I'm sure I am probably way long on time. I think I've covered most of this stuff. You're welcome to pause on here and read. Right. And I've already covered this. Right. So that is it for today. I definitely did not have time for a writing activity. So if you submitted yesterday's, then you're good. If you did not submit yesterday's writing activity, then please email me a one-sentence claim. All right. You're welcome to use addressing this prompt. You're welcome to use these documents to guide you. And that is it for today. So I guess I'll go a little slower so you can pause if you want. So take a minute. Moving on. Take a minute. Right. Okay. Okay. All right. And that is all for today. Sapriati.